You're listening to episode number 18 of the Indie Film Tribe podcast with me, your host, Angela Matamocha. Welcome. Hi there, good people. Hi. Angela Matamocha here of Indie Film Tribe. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today I am, as always, super excited, but today really excited. Screenwriters, for you screenwriters, today is for you. This episode is for you. On the line, I have the author of Getting It Right, An Insider's Guide to a Screenwriting Career, and, which I'm really excited to talk about, her most recent book, which just launched, Breaking In, Tales from the Screenwriting Trenches. Ooh. But not only is this lady an author, she is also a master career coach for professional and emerging screenwriters. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Jessup.
Oh
Hello.
my God, you make me sound so good. I want to meet that person.
I do too, which is why I have you on. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Lee. This is such a treat to have you.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, honestly, this is wonderful. And one of the reasons that I really wanted you on, I personally have never worked with a screenwriting coach. I don't know what that looks like. I have no idea. And I have a feeling that we have listeners that also have not worked with a screenwriting coach. And not just a master screenwriting coach, but someone that has also written 2 books on screenwriting. So again, thank you so much. I'm just so excited to just kind of dig in and pick your brain.
Let's do it.
All right. First of all, I want to know, what is it that you love about working with screenwriters?
Listen, I love screenwriters. Screenwriters are kind of my people and my tribe. I was one many years ago. I was lucky enough to get a script picked up very early and find out that I didn't want to be a writer, but that didn't mean I didn't want to work story and develop material and work with writers. The world of storytelling is very much my world, and I just really thrive on supporting others. I always have. So in this line of work, I get to work with writers who are everywhere from emerging to professional. It brought some amazing people into my life. It allowed me to support some people that I'm a huge fan of. Fan of their work, and it's really a pleasure. We do everything from breaking story to managing the career, building the career, identifying brand, managing representation, preparing for pitches. List goes on and on. But really think of me as a guidance counselor for screenwriting. It's all about identifying that next goal and figuring out how to achieve it, creating that path and that strategy, going for it, adjusting as needed, achieving that goal, and then going for that next one.
Something interesting that you just said, and I want to delve into a bit, is brand. For some reason, in my mind, that really strikes me for screenwriters. Because I think, okay, as an actor, you must have a brand. Most directors do as well, yeah? And products, what have you. But for screenwriting, this is very interesting to me. How important is this idea of brand for screenwriters?
Oh, incredibly. I mean, what we really are looking at is, what do you do best? Nobody does everything best. Doesn't matter the walk of life or the craft or, the particular discipline. My daughter is a gymnast. We all know where she's at her best, right? She's not going to be the best on all 4 events. She's a vaulter, always been. She's pretty damn good on everything else, but she's an amazing vaulter. So that's where we know that her strength is. And it's the same with screenwriting. The reality is that writing comedy is very different than writing a thriller, that's very different than writing a contemplative drama. Writing a half-hour network comedy is entirely different than writing 1-hour cable drama. It's different pacing, different characters, different worlds, different approaches. There's so many differences there. So brand really speaks to, what do you do best? And if you want to be properly developed in the industry, the people who are helping develop you, be they agents, managers, coaches like me, development executives, current executives, have to be able to understand what you do best in order to support you.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Now, I wonder if someone is just a beginning screenwriter, what if they don't know yet what they're best at? Is it something that you sort of guide them to learn, or is it kind of an instinctual thing where they sort of inside kind of know what they're best at? Or, this is a wraparound question, do they just sort of try different things until, boom, this is what I do?
Listen, in the beginning, you certainly try different things until you find where you're at your best. So I've worked with writers who early on in their career said, okay, I don't have a career yet, but I want to be a sci-fi writer. Only you ask them to write sci-fi, and it's a disaster, right? They aspire to write Star Wars, but what's really happening on the page is not that at all. I had one writer like that ultimately we found out that she's a great grounded thriller writer, like twisted, weird, scary, character-driven, gritty, just fantastic. So there is some discovery to be done. There's also pivoting that will happen mid-career oftentimes. So, I work with a writer who's done quite a few sitcoms and was successful in that, as a staff writer, story editor, executive story editor, but realized suddenly that storytelling is taking him to a 1 hour space, right? He wants to tell more story. He wants to delve in deeper. So, while he's not looking at going to thrillers and, action dramas, he's looking at converting to light 1 hour dramas, which is the thing everybody, fortunately, is looking for in the industry right now. And it's not that big of a leap to go from half-hour comedy to a light 1 hour drama or dramedy. The reality is that brand today is not so much defined in a particular genre, it's defined in a space. So are we talking about a darker space, or are we talking about a lighter space? If we're talking about network comedy, or are we talking about cable comedy? Those are very different things. So it's really understanding that space where you live, and also understanding, if you're a feature writer, who is your audience? If you're a TV writer, who's going to watch your show, and by extension, which outlets would it be distributed from or through? So are you freeform CW, MTV, or are you HBO, Netflix? Maybe if ABC decides to be super daring again, or Amazon. Are you a light, fun, procedurally 1 hour that would go to TNT or a few years ago to USA? So understanding all of this also helps defining the brand. But, the best place to really discover it is on the page, because you can think you're hilarious, but if it doesn't show up, we got problems.
Having said that, with new writers, what is the one challenge that you see comes up for you over and over and over?
Writers getting material into the industry before it's ready.
Oh, man.
That's the biggest. I mean, I wrote it, I thought it was great, I gave it to my best friend, and, he's really critical. Granted, he is not a story person, but he's really critical, and he gave me some notes, but he thought it was great, so I sent it in, and nobody responded. I find that writers, understandably, nobody wants to leave themselves open to too aggressive an attack on their work, and I understand that. But you really, in order to improve in your craft, you have to challenge yourself and challenge the work. And I find that new writers, the biggest problem is that they just send material in before they're ready, before the material itself has been properly vetted, before it's been challenged by the right type of person. So the right type of person is a working writer who is working today, not 20 years ago. A director, a producer who is very apt to work with story. It can be a consultant. It can be a person who does coverage. It can be a writing instructor. It can be any number of resources. They can be paid or unpaid. The point is not, do you pay them? The point is, do they challenge you? Do they challenge the work? Do they help you get to the best version of your script? And listen, having gotten notes, I know it can be really not fun. But the point is to become the best writer. And a lot of writers forget that it's all about mastery of craft. And if we're talking about mastery, sad to say it, the first script's not going to get you there. Second script's not going to get you there. You really have to work and develop your craft, not only so that you can do it well once, but so that you know how to do it well a second and a third and a fourth time, and then potentially start getting writing assignments and getting into the space in a professional manner.
Hmm. I can imagine because I know for me, the second that I finish a script, immediately I just want to share it with the world. I love it. It's great. Come on. It's ready to go. And oftentimes that is the truth and that is the reality. I have to stop and have someone read it.
Share it with your friends, share it with writers groups, share it with, people where there are no consequences to sending a script before it's ready.
Right.
But wherever there are consequences, whether it's an agent or manager that you're trying to impress, or whether it's a producer or an executive, the reality is that you are inevitably being evaluated from first script on. And what that means is that if you got somebody excited about reading your first script and your first script really didn't deliver and potentially wasn't as professional as you thought it was, or lacked clarity or needed help in any number of areas, the next time that person is just not going to be as eager to read you. They may still read you, but it will likely take more time. If they have an assistant, it might go to the assistant, it may go to an intern. They may just say, it's not for me, because they're going to look back at their notes on you and see, the material was really not professionally presented, or it lacked a central conflict, or our protagonist didn't have a clear active goal, or, we had lack of conflict or unclear conflict, or this was entirely internal journey, no external. So the moment that they start saying those things as they revisit their notes, they're going to go, oh, okay, it's not going to go to the top of my list unless they read an original script and they said, I love the voice, I love the writer, this one is not for me, but I love the voice. That is really the only thing that will save you.
That's so interesting. I have to ask, and especially since you just finished your second book here, I always wonder when a writer submits a full script to the agent, manager, what have you, how important is a synopsis and log line? Are they really reading entire scripts, or do they just really want to get concepts and ideas? Because I guess in my mind, I just wonder, like, who is doing all this reading? This is a lot of reading.
Yeah, listen, ultimately, producers are reading, agents are reading, managers are reading. But, I remember years ago, I had a good friend who was a director, and his roommate was a director of development for a fairly large company. And we had brunch one Sunday morning, and this director of development comes out to have brunch in the backyard along with a bunch of friends. And we said, such and such, and I won't reveal his name just to, protect the innocent, such and such, how was your morning? And he said, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, I already read 20 scripts. Now, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, you did not read 20 scripts. You potentially read 20 sets of 5 pages from 20 scripts and set them aside, but you did not read all of those scripts. The reality is that when anybody reads script in the industry, because this industry is in a perpetual state of overwhelm, if they don't respond, if you don't give them a reason to keep reading, they're going to set it aside. So by default, they're constantly looking for the reason to say, not good enough, I'm going to go to the next. They're looking for those markers because they are overwhelmed, because there is too much work, because there isn't, kind of lazy reading time. Oh, gee, I don't have anything to do today. Let's go find a script. I mean, that's the same idea that, people get with, I'm going to put up a website and the industry will come find my website and download my script. That doesn't really happen because people who are working in the industry are just that. They are working, they are busy, they're short of resources. If you're talking about managers, they work on commission only. So, they're reading, they're potentially not reading the whole script. They potentially are giving it to an assistant to see what the assistant thinks. And if the assistant has good things to say, then yeah, sure, they will surface it for their boss, their executive, their manager, their agent, to just say, you should read this one. Let's see what you think. They are reading, they're just not reading the entire piece because, frankly, if you don't get them by the first 5, 10, 15, 20 pages, it really doesn't matter what you do on page 80. I recently read a script from somebody who, was really excited about the third act and told me that, like, oh, I know the first act is lacking, and I know it needs work, and I know the characters aren't there, and I know that, because nobody's going to get there unless you excite me in page 2. And page 5, and by excite me, I don't mean like blow up a house, but show me writing that I'm excited to discover and see unfold.
And that is what that just sprung into my mind the moment that you said, this person said that they read, 20 scripts that morning by 10 a.m., but the reality is they just read a few pages of these scripts. Mm-hmm. So immediately in my mind, I thought, well, God, those first couple of pages, You gotta freaking really knock people's socks off.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the sad truth, and a lot of people do miss that and think that it doesn't speak to them, but the sad truth is that most scripts get set down and, for example, don't graduate to semifinals or quarterfinals in competitions because of poor formatting, because of typos. And I see it in the highest level where, my writers have to bear with me when I get really pissed off at them about not presenting professional work. But the point of view of agents and managers and producers and executives is like, listen, if you can't take the time to proofread your work or invest $100 in having somebody proof your work, then I don't have the time to spend on it. So oftentimes we'll see material get put down for those reasons, for lack of description, for overly written description. So the first thing anybody in this industry does with a script, me included, so I will lump myself in with the guilty here, is scan through a script, see how densely written it is, see how much white space I have on the page, see whether or not I have any monologues that are happening again and again and again and again. See whether this is going to be a tough read for me, whether there are already hurdles that I have to get over that I know of before I start reading the material. So, if I have paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs of densely written description describing every item in a room for me, unless you are describing or setting up a movie or a TV show that's going to take place in one room, in which case every object is going to have meaning because it is all holding the secret to why our great-grandfather killed our great-grandmother. I don't need all that detail, and so it instantly shows a lack of professionalism, and that's instantly the way for us to go, okay, maybe not.
Okay, so Lee,
you just want to get past it.
just so for our listeners that may not understand this idea of white space, when you're talking about white space versus monologue and all these descriptions, what is that exactly? So our listeners can understand white space. What is she talking about?
Screenplays are meant to be read top to bottom as opposed to left to right, which is how you read a book. We are meant to read top to bottom, and that means that you are really looking at like an Indian blanket design, a lot of white space, and some black in order to really let us go through it quickly and effectively. We are not there to sit down and concentrate on every sentence and every word. So not having a lot of dark space or a lot of white space means to me that your descriptions and your action sequence, any action in the material is overly written, overly described, that you are not economizing your writing. It also, if we see it in dialogue, if we're not seeing a lot of white space in dialogue and instead are seeing kind of chunky monologues down the page, you're telling me that people are monologuing. People don't monologue in real life. I don't want to read a monologue. I want to read a conversation. I want to read an interaction. I want to read a sample of humanity. To me, the only time you should have anybody monologuing is a lawyer in a courtroom or the president making the final speech of the movie. Like, really, that is the only time for a monologue. So we look for those things. And the good news today is that scripts are so readily available everywhere. And as a screenwriter, you should know what I'm talking about. So, look online, see what you can find. The Blacklist has been really, really great with making scripts to made movies and television shows available. If you're in LA, go to the WJ Library. There are plenty of resources online to get those scripts, so look at them and look at how they're written. That said, don't look at what Vince Gilligan does in a new pilot and think, I want to do just that, because Vince Gilligan can do whatever in the world Vince Gilligan wants, and you can't. So really look at those examples.
That's a great idea because I think, as screenwriters or for anyone in the industry, really, it's so much easier and we spend so much more time watching movies than we actually do reading screenplays.
Real example is that every night before I go to sleep, I start a new script that is in my queue that I have to read. I don't start it because I'm thinking I'm going to get through it tonight. I usually start it, I'm usually done working between, 9, 10, 11 o'clock at night. And so the very last thing I will do in my workday is start reading a script before I go to sleep. And the reason that I do it is in order to set my own expectations of what kind of work I have to do with that script. right? It's not so much about let's get into the story, let's really get these characters. It's about let me dip my toe in that water
Yeah.
and understand about the level of writer that we're talking about. Because even if I'm exhausted and I'll fall asleep after 5 pages, I know by 5 pages about what sort of writer I'm talking about. I know what level of conversation we're going to be having.
Oh gosh, that's interesting. And I love that you said that because I think that's something that any of us can do right before we go to bed, just to see the way different scripts are written. And I guess this would also speak to your branding and trying to figure out your branding. The more different types of scripts you read, you'll figure out like, oh, this is kind of my style, or this is what I want to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing is to read scripts that made it to the blacklist the year before, so the blacklist list, not the website. And if your listeners want to email me, I'm more than happy to share those scripts that I have in a Dropbox. So you're more than welcome to share my email with them. But it's your job to read. It's your job to watch. It's your job to understand formatting. It's your job to understand literary choices in script. So do you novelize? Do you not novelize? Where can you novelize? What can you get away with? What do others get away with? What is style that you really love? What style really annoys you? You really want to learn those things and consider them.
Oh, I love that. That makes so much sense. Let me just veer off sort of on a different track for a moment, just about the writers that you are working with right now. Is there a particular writer or a project that really excites you right now?
I'm really kind of ridiculously lucky. I get to work with quite a few writers that I'm such a huge fan of. So I look forward to reading their work. I look forward to seeing their shows. So, I just finished watching 13 Reasons Why that I have a writer on that I just sobbed at. I have a writer on American Crime that just makes my heart pitter patter. And like in very real, socially appropriate ways today. And I have writers who are just starting out that I'm such a big fan of. So, one of my writers just started on Lethal Weapon on the TV show 2 days ago. And it's a writer I've been with really from day one of her building her writing career in LA. And we had dinner and celebrated and raised a glass of wine. And I had to tell her it was one of the more, in a career of many rewards, it was one of my most rewarding moments. I have a writer that I see weekly who's on a TV show and we're developing features. And, every Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, it's like the best start to my day. And I look forward to that day from just about Sunday. So I'm really fortunate in that I work with a lot of great writers. I have a feature writer in Colorado whom I love, who writes stuff that like the log lines sound as dismal and boring as can get, but his writing is just amazing. Like if he told me he wrote a script about the phone book, I will read it. It will be the first thing that I read because he's amazing. He's voicey and smart, and so I'm really lucky. It feels like I'm doing a disservice just naming those few because I have so many.
You have so many.
I'm a huge fan of, and the joke is that if you ask me this question next week, I would give you a bunch of other writers that I'm equally excited about. The spoils of my job, right? That I get to work with people that I'm genuinely just gaga over.
Oh, that's so exciting. That's so exciting. Something
Awesome.
you just said about this writer that if he wrote a phone book that you would read it, but you said his log lines were not so happening.
His subject matters are just dry. I read the first script of his that I ever read, he sent to me, and I read the log line that I won't repeat just to save him. And I remember like looking at the log line and looking at the script and turning to my husband that night, and I started reading early that night because I finished work early. I was like, oh, babe, it's going to be a long night. It's going to be a long night. And I finished that script in an hour and a half.
Wow.
And it came like hands down the best thing I read in 3 years. Hands down. Just brilliant, amazing. And then, he's now managed and developing something with representation and being very successful doing so. But he would run log lines by me before he got repped, and I would say to him, listen, in anybody else's hands, absolutely no, don't touch it. What the hell are you thinking? In your hands, like, go nuts. I can't stop you. Because he just earned that level of trust with his craft. That was, they're writers who are born. There are very few born writers, and most people want to be born writers. most are not, much as, most woodworkers aren't born knowing how to make a chair. It seems like an oversimplified analogy, but in truth, it's very, very simple because it is craft.
It's craft.
And he had to learn his craft as well, because the truth about that one script is that it had a great first and second act. That first draft that I read, the third act was like totally off the rails. So he worked on it, and he engaged the help of a reader that we're both fans of, and really brought it together so that when I read it the second time, it was even more amazing. It's the question is what kind of innate knowledge and innate talent you bring to the table. But nobody's going to be a born writer. Some people will be further along because they already have a voice or because they already have clarity. But there is craft that has to be learned, and there is no shortcutting that.
So true. So true. You just spoke about this one person's log line. So you love his writing. But having said that, how important is a log line, especially if you're a new writer and no one knows your work?
It is important, and that's where you want to really think about the idea. Now, luckily for that writer, he knew me and I knew somebody that I thought would be a fit that was building his list, and that manager was. So I managed to get the script read despite its logline. Then the writer went to place pretty high in the nickel, at which point just the world came calling, and you place in the nickel, nobody really gives a crap about your logline. It's like,
right. Yeah.
It's about, the meditation on toilet paper. Like, okay, bring it on. Let's read it. But that's what the nickel does for you. But yeah, I do think that you have to think about what you're writing in terms of it has to hold your passion, and it has to be something that means something to you. But you also have to understand, where does it fit? Does it fit in this landscape? Does it fit, near this landscape of what we're seeing in movie theaters? It has to be interesting. It has to be something that piques the interest of somebody else, because if you don't get that nickel placement, or if you don't win Final Draft Big Break, or if you don't come in top 25 on Tracking Bee, are you going to be able to get traction based on logline alone if you really don't know anybody, right? If you're banking on contests, or you're banking on the Blacklist website, or if you're banking on online pitches that you're doing with one of the many providers that are out there now, are you really going to be able to stimulate that interest or talk about it in such a way that will get somebody to say, oh my God, I have to read that? Now, the nice thing about pitching is and positioning is you can logline the plot, or you can logline thematics that you've deployed in the material. You can speak about what made you passionate about it. If you're pitching TV, you can certainly talk about world. So it is important what you logline and how you go into it. There's a strong way and a poor way of positioning anything, and that's just the truth of the matter. But you do have to consider it. You can't just say, oh, whatever, I put together a logline, I spent 3 minutes on it, and it's done. Unless you have the world's greatest idea, it's probably not done. And if you do have the world's greatest idea, then your execution is going to have to be great as well to get people actually reading it, as opposed to going, had a great idea, but totally messed it up.
I want to ask you about something that you just brought up, because this is something that I see in a lot of writers groups online, in a lot of, Facebook posts. Writers just, placing at all these different film festivals, different competitions. A lot of them I've never heard of, right? So is there like a top 5? Like, how important are all these competitions, all these film festivals? Because there's so many. There's so many out there.
There are so many. There are, just tons and tons and tons of them. When I used to have time on my hands back in the day, I used to do kind of market research to just survey how many contests out there. The last time I looked at it was 2012, and we were already like getting into the hundreds easily. To me, a competition is a kind of big fish, big pond kind of game. It's not about winning the Schenectady screenwriting contest. I don't think there is, which is why I'm using Schenectady. So if Schenectady is listening and you have a screenwriting contest, I apologize. It's not about winning that in terms of parlaying it to any attention in the industry. I think it's great for ego.
Yes.
And I think it's great to submit material to a competition with 200 entries and seeing that yours comes out on top. Fantastic. But I think it's a lot more about entering into a competition that accepts, 6,000 to 8,000 submissions every year and seeing that you get to top 25. seeing that you get, to top of your category or top 10 in a category. Like, those are the things that you want to see. So it's not about, once in a while I'll have somebody call me and say, oh, I'm really excited, I made top 10% in Nickel. Well, top 10% in Nickel is one of 750 scripts. That's reading 2 scripts a day if I want to find one in there that I'm really excited about. It's not about that. What competitions serve for the industry is as a vetting source. And vetting material is not identifying the top 750, it's identifying the top 50, the top 25, the top 10. So for me, the contests that really matter and do that, and they do that because they've managed to historically have success that parlay to industry success beyond landing representation. So landing representation used to be the bar, but I feel like we've passed that bar quite a while ago now. Those are, to me, Tracking Board, that just had a huge success story with Marianne, which is a script that surfaced in the current feature contest, made top 25, went on to sell. David Boxerbaum, who is like the most amazing agent on the film front, just sold it, and this happened a month or two ago. They also surfaced Matriarch by Eric Koenig.
And this is all Tracking Board.
Yeah, this is all Tracking Board, their Launchpad competition. They found Eric Koenig's script, Matriarch. That was top 25. That sold to Paramount for mid-6 figures. Then there's Tracking Bee that found Extent, the series with Halle Berry that went on to become a show. We have Final Draft that surfaced Larry Brenner's script Bethlehem in the top 3. That went on to sell to Universal. Then we have Austin Film Festival, who surfaced the creators of *Halt and Catch Fire*. And on top of that, then we have Nickel, obviously, because Nickel is, the one to rule them all. I also like Page a lot. I think they work really hard for their winners. Now, it's not to say that contests like ISA's fellowships are not great, and there are a few other small ones that I'm a fan of. But I think if your budget is limited and you're saying, like, what are my 5, you really want to bet on the ones that are going to give you industry access, that are going to connect you with people that have the reputation for finding, surfacing new writers, new scripts, because ultimately that's where the industry is looking. They're not looking at the Schenectady Screenwriting Conference because there is nothing to tell us that Schenectady holds the secret sauce for identifying a new writer that can go on to sell and make the people working with them successful and reach.
Okay, that's great. And I'll be sure to add these contests on the video and in the show notes, because again, I see there's trillions of competitions, and you often wonder, like, is this even worth my money? So thank you so much for that. Leah, I want to ask you, and I don't know if this will be something that you can answer, but here at Indie Film Tribe, one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and the people hopefully that are listening, is creating socially conscious content. Now, as a screenwriter, and you just mentioned 2 shows, the 13th, 13 Reasons Why, American Crime, these shows have real, like, sort of gritty, real social justice themes. If I'm a screenwriter and this is the kind of work that I want to do, is there a process I need to go through? Is there a way? Are there questions I need to ask myself? How can I create things like this?
Listen, I think you can look anywhere from that all the way through to Get Out, right?
Yeah.
An amazing, it's where is horror going? I finally found the answer.
Finally, right?
Yeah, my husband was like, I've been with you for almost 14 years. You've never wanted to go see a horror movie.
Yep.
And I loved it. I thought it was such a brilliant piece of work. I think that you have to challenge yourself, and I think you have to, as a writer, always ask yourself, what is it that you want to say? As a writer, you always have to have something to say. Now, don't get me wrong. If you end up writing on Law and Order, maybe you won't get to say it right at that moment, but it can still inform your writing in terms of your own projects. But I think you really have to think about what's important for you, and that means learn everything about the subject matter, research. So I had, a writer do research on child trafficking because he wanted to write something about child trafficking and prostitution. So he flew all over the country to meet with organizations that work to save those girls, and really research and really delve and become an expert in those things, become an expert in those stories that are interesting to you. Don't just fabricate to fabricate, but consider what's important to you. What do you want to say? What is the information that you need in order to say it authentically and in a real way. Remember that entertainment is still entertainment. But if you can find a way to say something through your work, those are the themes that really make your work resonate. So find what you're interested in and start studying it up and down. I think part of the joy of being a writer is the ability to immerse yourself in different worlds, in different societies, in different cultures, in different people, in different walks of life. Whatever is of interest to you, even if it's your own history and your own culture, submerge in it, talk to people, interview people. That is the fun of the job.
Yeah.
Find things that just fire you up as far as passion. Learn the craft to tell them in the most efficient and powerful way. But you are passionate about social justice. Identify the element or the avenue of social justice that is really exciting to you, and jump on in head first. Talk to everybody. Never be afraid to say, like, can I interview you? You wrote a book. I heard you speak. You were on a podcast. You are an attorney. You are an expert. You are a professor you are a community leader. Like, let me talk to you. Let me learn from you. Your job as a writer is to learn, and then take everything that you've learned and put it in a page in a way that just amazes us and teaches us and moves us.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, all right, this is great. I want to now veer off to your most recent project. And of course, I am talking about Breaking In, Tales from the Screenwriting Trenches. What made you write this book? What made you decide, you know what, let me just start talking to agents, to writers, to these people, the managers, and put it out there? How did this come about for you, Lee?
I'm one of these people that I myself always like being a student. I like learning from other people. I like listening. I am fortunate enough to have a very strong memory that allows me to kind of remember stuff and file it away and then pull it back when I need it. This is something that I'd wanted to do for a long time. And the longer this industry kind of gets away from the strike of 2008, the more I felt that we're hearing 2008, the year that changed everything, but nobody's talking about it. And there's not enough information out there, in my mind, from writers, not the superstar writers, right? Not the Max Landises of the world, not the John Space of the world, but writers who are working writers, who have broken in, who have made this into a career, agents, managers. I just wanted to create a collective in which we are aggregating their insights and opinions and are able to learn from them. Because I myself am a natural learner. I always want to learn. Honestly, the book gave me an opportunity to go out and interview a bunch of my friends that, you can't really interview over lunch. It allowed me to meet some new people that I'd never met that were more than generous to sit down with me for an interview. But I think that part of being a good writer, part of being a good filmmaker, and part of being a good entrepreneur, which directors and screenwriters certainly are, is being a constant student. Constantly learning more, figuring out more, finding more resources. And I wanted to bring those resources together. Now, this book is very much a cutting room floor book for me because there are hours and hours and hours and hours and some more hours of recorded interviews with some amazing people. But I didn't, I really started having the idea for this book when I started doing interviews for Final Draft with agents and managers, some of the best in the business. So David Wasserbaum, Marcus Goer, Zadok Angel. And I remember thinking after I did one such interview, there's a book here. It's not about the one interview. It's about the collective of opinions. It's about the aggregate of stories and what you can learn from them. And ironically, I started doing those, I think, around probably April. And by September, Focal Press came after me for a book. And I kind of went, oh, okay, there it is. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I knew what I found most interesting. And I think that if you write about the thing that is most interesting to you, whether it is fiction or nonfiction, whether it's screenplay or documentary, that's what brings other people along. And the book was just beautifully received. Tons of support, tons of positive feedback. So hopefully I did something right.
Congratulations, Lee. And for those of you listening and want to get her book, is this the best way to do it? Just go to leejessup.com?
Yeah, you can purchase it on my website. You can also do it on Amazon. It is Prime eligible, and there's a Kindle version on there as well. There's 40 interview subjects in there, so working writers, agents, managers, executives, program directors, et cetera, et cetera.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, for new writers that are listening, and this is kind of funny, besides your book, Lee, what is maybe the one or two books that you would recommend for emerging screenwriters, besides your two books?
Um, Probably The Artist's Way is one of them.
Yes, love Julia Cameron's work.
Stephen King's On Writing.
Ooh.
Sorry, I'm looking over at my
No, that's great. That's great.
that's one that really has inspired a lot of people. For television writers, Cam Miller's The Hero's Journey is really kind of the latest and greatest in television writing. I love Jen Grisanti's Change Your Story, Change Your Life, because I really do believe that it's about connecting the writer with the story as opposed to trying to fabricate new characters, new worlds, and distancing yourself from that. I really do think it's about putting yourself in the work. I love Pilar's Coffee Break Screenwriter, simply because I'm a working mom, so I'm not a person with a great deal of time on my hands for anything. Rewrite by Paul Chitlick is, I can go on for days and days and days. Obviously, Michael Haig is an amazing resource. I love him. There's so much good stuff there. Of course, as a writer, like, you have to take a look at Save the Cat, because the industry loves Save the Cat, and it's kind of the language that we've all adopted.
There seems to be such a love-hate relationship with Save the Cat. People seem to either just love it or like really violently hate it. It's so bizarre to me.
And here's the thing, like, you don't have to adopt anything, but you have to make the choice not to adopt it as opposed to just reject it.
Right.
I'm a big fan of outlining. For me, if you don't outline, you're either lazy or crazy, and either one of them works for me. You can have to learn to outline, in which case we can have that conversation. But if you, by practice, if you write and never outline, that to me is just, whoa, what do I do with that? So I think, Save the Cat is a great tool for outlining. And then ultimately you can choose what to keep and what to discard, but you want to make choices as opposed to just not know better. So you can read up Save the Cat and say, I hate it. I hate everything about it. But at least then you made a choice, as opposed to said, I'm just not going to read it because everybody hates it and I'm going to hate it too.
It's one of those things like you want to know the rules before you break them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about. And because of that, like, you want to study with everybody you can study with. Not because nobody's right or because there's the one right person. This is a difficult, challenging craft. You want to work on it. So you want to study, if you're writing TV, you want to study with Jen Grisanti, and you want to study with Script Anatomy, and you want to study with Corey Mandel so that you know how to do scene work. And you want to do Joan Shekels' insane weekend retreat. Like, you want to do all of those things because you have to be a student of the game. You have to read scripts. You have to study. You have to read books about scripts. You have to watch TV. You have to listen to podcasts. You have to read news. You have to do all of those things because that's what it means to become a working writer.
I love that. I love that. Oh my gosh, Lee, you are just such a wealth of knowledge and just such passion about this. I could just tell, and I just love it so much. Thank you so much. Before we jet off today, I want to veer another direction one last time before we leave. Lee, just having said all this and just sort of being in this space at this time, do you, Lee Jessup, believe that you were put on this planet at this particular time for a specific reason, or for you, Lee, is it just random?
I don't believe in random. I believe everything happens for a reason. Just looking at the universe, looking at the way that it works. I don't know that I can say with assurance, I know what I was put on this earth for. I can say that I was put on this earth to love my husband and to bear my children. And I think everything else we kind of can say with assurance later on in life, when we have a more complete picture. I do feel like I am doing something that is completely innate to me and full of joy, and that in that little teeny tiny way, I just, by providing happiness and satisfaction and support and insight, I tend to give back to the world in a little teeny tiny way, because I do believe that positivity goes a long way and is necessary. We need a little bit more goodness in this world, especially right now.
Touche.
But my purpose is, to mother my children and to love my husband and to give peace and rest to my parents and grandparents. Beyond that, I'm lucky with anything else.
Lee, I would just, love to take this moment to acknowledge you for just the passion and the zest that you have for life. I'm only just meeting you now, and I'm just going to pause while this fire engine goes by. Help is on its way. Help is on its way. But you just have such a zest for life and for stories and for your family, and it's just so contagious. Thank you so much for being here and just being such a force in this industry, and especially being a woman of force that has all this knowledge and all this experience. I've obviously never worked with you, but I look forward to the day when I do, because I can just tell you are so passionate and so knowledgeable about what you do. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for doing this. I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think anytime we can give back, anything that we can enhance somebody else's experience with knowledge, with support, we're all the better for it. So thank you for doing it.
Absolutely. And thank you, Indie Film Tribe, for hanging out with Lee and I today. Until next time. Bye.